So in our cultures we are quite used to something called tradition, meaning that people bring over a certain way to do things, maybe from decade to decade, maybe from century to century, maybe in a few cases from 1,000 years to another. But the thing called transmission, I mean where something like a living energy is passed on, this is a lot more rare. This is not something that we see so often. And therefore it's quite unique, but I'm going to tell you now about our transmission lineage. Actually, when Buddha taught 2,550 years ago, when he reached enlightenment and started passing on his instructions, then at that time he had three kinds of students. Some wanted to avoid the suffering of their world. They mainly concentrated on keeping a distance to anything that might disturb them. They often ended up in monasteries. Others wanted to improve the world. They wanted to go in there and create a better society, or maybe on a smaller scale, just a better family or a better life for a few people. And finally, there were those who would rather have been enlightened yesterday than today, who really trusted their Buddha nature and who aimed to recognize mind through whatever happened in the world. And this is the last group, the group on the level of Diamond Way, of Buddhist Tantra, of Mantrayana, Vajrayana, Dorje Tekpa, however we want to mention it. It's this third kind of group I want to tell about now. Actually, if Buddhism should disappear today and they would find the books again in 500 years, the Theravada, the small way of avoiding one's own problems, and the Mahayana, the great way of compassion and wisdom, these two could be resurrected. Theravada if people had a certain amount of life experience, and Mahayana if they had quite a lot more. But the Diamond Way teachings, the teachings that go directly and touch us and transform us in a direct way, these can only be transmitted when somebody has the experience and is passing it on. So it's actually, with 2,500 years of Buddhist history, it's actually quite amazing that lineages and transmissions like the one we will hear about today, that this can actually exist. Often it was like a thin line, one teacher having a teaching, passing it on to one student who realized it and passed it on to the next one again. But actually today, Tibetan Buddhism has several real living transmissions, and I will start by explaining how these things happened when people came to Buddha 2,550 years ago. At that time, Buddha could see their minds, and he saw very clearly if they had the kind of minds that would benefit from an abstract transmission. And if they did that, then he would, he would look at them again. And if they were mainly anger dominated, if they were mainly thinking of what they didn't like, he'd give them the teachings called Mahāti, Dzogchen, or Great Perfection. If the people were more confusion motivated, or you can say that, or more like caught by confusion, but still had confidence in their own Buddha nature, he would give the Madhyamaka teachings, the teachings of the Uma Chempo, the teachings of learning step by step, which however do not permit enlightenment in a lifetime, because removing ignorance just doesn't have that power, it doesn't have that transformative power. And if people came to him with mainly desire, mainly touched by the things they like and that are inspiring and interesting, like myself and most of my students today, then actually he would give the teachings called Mahamudra, Great Seal, or Chakche Chempo in Tibetan. So these different teachings were given in order to show people their mind on the level of abstraction, on the level of direct awareness, pointing out mind's nature to the students. This is what happened, what he brought out. On the other hand, if people came to Buddha and they had minds that functioned better with form, with sound, with mantra and so on, that needed something to hold on to, something to exemplify, if they had minds that preferred inner imagination, pictures, working with Buddha forms and so on, then Buddha gave the 4 levels of so-called tantras or secret teachings, and on the level of the highest tantra he gave the Mahanuttara, that which is beyond all things. So here, when people only slightly trusted their Buddha nature, he would give the Kriya Tantra, where oneself was very small, Buddha was very big, and one would do a lot of things in order to not disturb the Buddha. One wouldn't eat, one wouldn't drink, one would do a lot of things to make the Buddha feel that he was special. Then, when one had more confidence in one's Buddha nature, one would do the Charya Tantra, where the contact to the Buddha was closer. Then, with even more trust, one would do the Yoga Tantra, where one was nearly looking into the Buddha's eyes, but one was still hiding something under the mattress. There was still something one was not letting into one's relationship with the Buddha. But finally then also, for those who really fully trusted Buddha and their own mind, then he gave the Mahanuttara Yoga Tantra, the only one of these 4 where one meditates on united forms, and where actually the last taboos of sexuality and so on, where they were removed, and one really meditated on space and joy in the union of the male and the female Buddhas. And this last group of Buddhas on the level of the Mahanuttara Yoga Tantra, they could actually bring one full enlightenment, because they brought together and united all opposites and all differences in one blissful totality. So here again, of course, even on the highest levels, people carry their tendencies, and again here, for the people who wanted form and not only abstraction, like we mentioned it before, then also there were 3 classes. For those who were mainly angry, who were sure what they didn't like, there would be the Father Tantra, with a very long building up phase where one was made completely clear that one knew whatever was happening, that one would not leave the congregation with a sign on one's trousers saying, "Please kick me," but one would stay in control. And the mixing phase, where the Buddha is dissolved with ourselves and there's only awareness, this was kept short because people like that don't really like that. If one's angry, one likes to keep one's space and be protected. If people were more confused, then Buddha would give the non-dual tantra. This is where Kalachakra or Dünkor is very important, the way. And here the building up and the mixing phase are approximately of the same length, and there are always a lot of things to focus on. And if people mainly had desire, like again most of my students and myself, then Buddha would give the Mother Tantra, where the building up phase was not so important because one had basic trust anyway, but dissolving the Buddhas, mixing them into oneself and staying in a state of naked awareness, just blissful awareness. This was kept long because it felt natural. So these different teachings I just mentioned on the formless level of great perfection, great middle way, and and great seal or great sign, and the formed transmission on the level of Father Tantra, non-dual Tantra, and Mother Tantra. These were transmitted since the time of Buddha until today. It's actually said that the lower levels of teachings, the Kriya Charya and Yoga Tantras, were given by Buddha in his ordinary form. He would sit there in his golden form, and then when the students came, he would project out a form of energy and light which fit their inner state, which would show them their basic nature, on the level of liberation and enlightenment. And after that, they would meditate on them, and they would hear the mantra, the vibration, which was a bridge to this experience. But they would meditate, as I said, on single forms. While when people came to Buddha who really trusted their Buddha nature on a deep level, Buddha himself would transform his body into the form of the Buddha they wanted to meditate on, or which fit their mind, which fit their special state. And then he would rumble out as a vibration which brought the connection to that. So all these things were given by Buddha himself. I know that some scientists who noticed that these things surfaced at different times, some professors at different universities think that these teachings were not given by Buddha but brought in and added afterwards. But actually in the teachings we know, for instance in the Karma Kagyu lineage, we see very clearly where Buddha manifested in different forms, in order to transmit the teachings. For instance, we know where Buddha visited Indra Bodhi, the King Indra Bodhi, together with a lot of his students, 500 I think, and he was invited in, and after they had all been given food, then the King Indra Bodhi started asking, hey, didn't you just lift off your seat, and why do you always know what I want to talk about, and so on. And he asked some real teachings from Buddha, and Buddha just gave him the ordinary stuff about renunciation and taking it easy and not getting involved. And the king just looked at Buddha and said, hey, come on, get real, I got 500 queens and a big kingdom, I mean, tell me something I can use. And then Buddha actually told Indra Bodhi how first he put a blanket over the head of all his monks who were there who shouldn't have that teaching. And then after that he taught Indra Bodhi, how to meditate on himself as a blue sitting Buddha Sangwadvipa, and all his queens as a female partner of the Sangwadvipa, and how to meditate on taking the joys down in the body, holding them, turning them back, transforming them, mixing the male and the female and everything. And it's actually said that when Indra Bodhi died, all his 500 wives became rainbows, came into his heart, he became a rainbow, and everybody was enlightened. And actually we have the completely same story with Mapa, only he just had 8 wives, right? But they became one with him, and also enlightenment was reached. So this highest level, where there is confidence in the purity of everything, in the purity of union, of bliss in space and so on, then there is a full transmission showing us everything as being meaningful and perfect as it is. So Buddha gave these teachings to 3 different sources. He gave them to Channa Dorje, the blue diamond in hand, holding here the bowl, or the Zibduk Mudra, and the Dorje here. He gave them to the Dakinis, meaning the Lady Buddhas, who in their bodies, if we unite with them, are capable of transferring highest wisdom. And he also gave them to the Nagas, the snakes, the snake serpents, and if you see a snake moving that's being attacked, you'll know exactly that there's highest wisdom in those motions. It's an incredible thing. So Buddha gave these teachings to these three sources, and actually it's said that Chernigov, or diamond in the hand, that once he was out, a demon came and wanted to steal the teachings. And Chernigov came back and started tying a few knots in the demon, right? But the demon, to destroy, he spit his poison over the books, and the only way to protect the books was that Chernigov sucked up all the poison, and of course he didn't get sick, but he did get blue, and that's the reason he's blue today. We also hear about Nagarjuna going to a mountain in the south of India and actually taking different teachings there and bringing out the teachings of the Nagas and so on. So we hear that again and again, these teachings that Buddha placed in these different, on these different levels of manifestation, that they were brought in and activated and came into the different lineages. So from 500 before Christ and until about 500 after, for about 1,000 years, these teachings were kept more or less secret. They were spoken in small groups. People's minds were quite simple. They had an easy time just working the Theravada, the first 500 years up to the time of Jesus. And then from the time of the beginning of our calculation till 500, their minds got more complicated and they needed more explanations, and the Mahayana, the Great Way, came up. But around 500 years after our time, then this was not sufficient anymore. The philosophical explanations, the exhortations to really, think of compassion and so on, just didn't have the power to hold people anymore. So at this time, then people wanted more than that. They wanted ways for direct experience. And at that time, then the deepest teachings, the Diamond Way teachings, came up and were spread. The last teachings to be spread were actually the Kalachakra teachings about year 1000, when Buddhism was being destroyed completely by Islam and also by Hinduism in northern India. But already 500 years before that, we see that the main tantras of the father and the mother tantra lineage, that they were being given especially in northern India, in the Himalayas, in Assam, some also in Kashmir and so on, but especially in the center and the east of the Himalayas. So they actually came to these Buddhist teachings, highest teachings, came to Tibet twice. First around 750 with Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, who came up first. He gave an immense amount of teachings, but after he left, his main wife, Yeshe stayed, and she would rather meditate than do politics. And then the shamans, the Bonpos as they're called, the black Bonpos actually, they destroyed nearly everything he had left, and only the hidden teachings under the lakes, in the caves, in the wind, in the mind, and things like that. These different terras or thermas, they were the only thing that were left. Then for about 300 years, from 800 or 250 years, from 800 to 1050, there was hardly any Buddhist activity in Tibet. A few people straggled here and there and so on, but the main thing was destroyed. And then Marpa came up, and Marpa is the father of our lineage.